So we have a comment. This commenter's name is Craven5063, and he says, you realize the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution didn't specify race or mention black people, right? As if that matters. So your loaded question is based on a false premise. And before you respond, only blacks were slaves, the 13th Amendment denounced indentured servitude as well as slavery, and there were plenty of white Irish indentured servants in the United States. Even if we accept your false question at face value, how does that prove white privilege today? It doesn't. So please, go ahead and educate yourself. You obviously don't know what you're talking about, and the best part is, I'm not even American. I'm British. So if I can find this out, there's no reason you can't. I'll answer that bit of dribble with this. At Craven5063, you're using a false equivalency. Because slavery and indentured servitude were abolished at the same time, doesn't mean they are the same thing. So I will respond by saying only blacks were allowed, by the US government by the way, to be held as slaves. Slaves didn't have rights, couldn't own property, slaves couldn't vote. Slaves were considered less than human by virtue of not owing debt, like indentured servants, but for being black. After slavery, there were more laws, standards, and practices that only affected blacks or disproportionately affected blacks. Laws like the Black Codes, the Jim Crow laws, or practices like redlining and housing discrimination. Over the decades, those laws, standards, and practices have systematically denied blacks wealth. Wealth in this country equals power. We can look at the substantial wealth gap that illustrates my point. That still affects blacks today. There wasn't a system in this country that did those same types of things to whites. Because of that, whites have privilege. Now, if this is something you can't acknowledge as fact, then maybe it's not something you can't see, rather something you won't see. We thank you for your comment.